Welcome back to the deep dive, where we'd like to take these deep dives, into all sorts of fascinating topics.
That's right.
And today we're going to be diving into the world of philosophy.
Yes.
Which I think a lot of people, it can feel a little overwhelming at first.
Yeah, it can.
But trust me.
It's a big one.
It's incredibly rewarding, and it really does. It touches every aspect of our lives.
It does.
In ways that we don't even realize, I think, sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Philosophy is all about asking these fundamental questions about ourselves, about the world, and our place in it.
Right.
It's about seeking wisdom and understanding.
Yeah.
Not just accepting things at face value.
I love that.
Really trying to think deeply.
Yeah, and I think if you've ever sort of wondered about things like the nature of reality, the meaning of life, like why are we here? What's it all about?
The big questions.
The big questions, or like the basis of morality, like what makes something right or wrong?
Yeah.
You're already engaging in philosophical thinking.
You are.
Whether you realize it or not.
Absolutely.
And what I think is so fascinating about philosophy is that it's not just some kind of abstract academic pursuit.
Yeah.
You think of these like old guys with beards, stroking their beards,
right?
In togas.
Yeah.
Just like thinking these big thoughts, but it has practical implications.
It does.
For how we live our lives.
It really does.
How we make decisions, how we interact with other people.
It shapes our worldview.
Yes.
It shapes our values.
Excellent.
And those things have very real world effects.
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, we're going to be kind of your guides.
Okay.
Through 5 major areas of philosophy.
Right.
We're going to be looking at logic.
Yeah.
Metaphysics. Epistemology.
Oh, big words.
I know. Ethics and political philosophy.
Right.
So think of these areas as kind of like different lenses through which we can examine these big questions that have fascinated thinkers for centuries.
For millennia, really.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these questions go back to the ancient Greeks.
Totally. All right, so first up, we've got logic.
Okay.
So
logic.
This is the art of clear thinking.
Yes.
It's the foundation of reasoning, and it's crucial for pretty much everything we do.
I think people underestimate how important logic is in their everyday lives.
Totally.
From the simplest things to the most complex.
Right.
Like deciding what to eat for breakfast to, making major life decisions.
Just arguing on the internet.
Especially arguing on the internet.
Oh my gosh.
We could all use a little more logic there.
Right. So logic helps us analyze information.
Yes.
Identify fallacies and make sound judgments.
It's like a toolkit for your brain.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. Equipping you with the skills to think critically and avoid being misled by faulty reasoning.
Right. Because, let's face it,
there's a lot of that out there.
There's so much information.
Oh, my God.
All right. We're bombarded with information every day.
Constantly.
Especially online.
Yes. The internet is a wild west of information.
It is. And it's hard to know.
It is. Exactly. And that's where logic comes in.
Exactly.
And helps us sift through all that noise.
Yeah.
And determine what's reliable. What's not.
And what's just like someone's crazy opinion.
Exactly. Or, an attempt to manipulate us.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key aspects of logic is understanding fallacies.
Absolutely.
Which are these errors in reasoning that can lead to false conclusions.
Yes, fallacies are like traps.
Oh, okay.
In our thinking.
Okay.
They can trip us up and light us astray.
And sometimes we don't even realize that we've fallen into one.
That's right.
Right.
We might be using them ourselves without even knowing it.
Yes.
And other people are definitely using them on us.
Right. Have you ever been in an argument with someone?
Oh, all the time.
And you're just like, wait a minute.
Yes.
How did they get there?
Like, how did we even get to this point?
Right.
Yeah, that's often a sign that a fallacy is at play.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
It's like they're using these logic tricks to win the argument.
Exactly.
Rather than actually engaging.
Yeah, it's not about finding the truth. It's about winning.
It's about being right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because then nobody really learns anything.
No. And that's the whole point of dialogue and debate, right?
That's right.
Is to kind of come to some kind of shared...
It's about the exchange of ideas.
Exactly.
And hopefully getting closer to the truth.
Yes, exactly.
Even if we never fully get there.
Right.
At least we've, explored the issue from different angles.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So one common fallacy is guilt by association.
Yeah.
Where someone tries to discredit an argument.
Right.
By associating it with a person or a group that's seen as negative.
Yes. This is a classic one. And it's used all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Especially in politics.
Oh, absolutely.
But also in everyday life. You know, it's basically saying you shouldn't believe this because this bad person believes it.
Yeah.
Or this group that you don't like believes it.
Yeah, give me an example. Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say someone says, you know, you shouldn't believe in climate change.
Right.
Because, you know, a lot of conspiracy theorists also believe in climate change.
Right. Yeah, that's classic.
That's guilt by association.
Right, right.
The truth of a claim doesn't depend on who believes it.
Exactly.
We need to look at the evidence.
Right.
Not the person making the argument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, Hitler drank water, so we shouldn't drink water.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's a ridiculous example.
Right. But it's the same logic.
But it illustrates the point.
Yes. Yes, totally. Okay, so
logic isn't just about this informal reasoning and spotting fallacies. It also has this formal mathematical side.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which explores the structure of arguments, the relationship between propositions.
Oh, like there's a whole other level of logic.
There is.
That's like symbols and formulas and stuff.
Exactly. It gets very abstract.
Yeah.
Very theoretical.
Wow.
But it's really fascinating.
Okay.
And it's incredibly powerful.
So give me an example, like.
So for example, you know, one of the pioneers of formal logic was this guy named Gottlob Frege.
Gottlob Frege.
Yes, it's a great name.
It is a great name.
And he developed this system called concept script.
Concept script, okay.
To represent logical arguments with mathematical precision.
Wow.
Right. So he was trying to create a language of pure thought.
Wow.
Where you could express any logical argument in a very precise way.
So he was like a logician, mathematician.
So he was a philosopher, logician, mathematician.
Wow, triple threat.
All rolled into one.
Wow, okay.
And his work laid the foundation for modern mathematical logic.
Okay.
Which has had this huge impact on fields like computer science and artificial intelligence.
Wow. So the logic that we use to program computers is rooted in these philosophical ideas.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, philosophy is often seen as this very abstract, you know, kind of detached from reality field.
Yeah.
But it's actually deeply connected to the way we understand and interact with the world.
So logic is like this foundational thing.
It is.
That underlies so much.
So much of our lives.
Our thinking, our technology, our
communication. Yeah. So, okay, we've got formal logic. We've got informal logic.
Right.
What else? Are there other kinds of logic?
Well, there are different branches of logic.
Okay.
Different systems, different ways of looking at it.
Okay.
But within this world of formal logic, there are these mind-bending concepts like paradoxes.
I love paradoxes. They're fun, right?
They are.
They're like these little puzzles for your brain.
Yes.
They're statements that seem to contradict themselves.
Okay.
But somehow still make sense.
Give me like a classic example of a paradox.
Okay. One of the most famous is the liar's paradox.
The liar's paradox. Okay.
Imagine the sentence. This sentence is false.
This sentence is false.
Okay, so if that sentence is true, then it must be false.
Right.
Because that's what it claims.
Right.
But if it's false, then it must be true.
Okay, my brain hurts.
Right. It creates this loop of contradiction.
It does.
Yeah.
It's like it breaks the rules of logic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And paradoxes like this, they challenge our assumptions about language, truth,
Yeah.
and the very nature of logic itself.
Right.
They highlight the limits of our understanding.
Yeah.
And they push us to think more deeply about the foundations of knowledge.
Right. Like what can we actually know for sure if these paradoxes exist? Yeah.
If our logic can be broken, then what does that say about our ability to understand the world?
Totally. Okay, so we've had a taste of logic.
Right.
The art of thinking.
Yeah.
But now let's move on to something even more fundamental.
Okay.
Metaphysics.
Metaphysics.
Yes.
The big one.
The big one, yeah.
The granddaddy of them all.
This is the branch of philosophy that tackles the big questions about reality.
Yes.
Existence. The nature of being.
It's about what is real. What is the nature of reality?
Yes.
What is the meaning of existence?
Wow.
These are the questions that keep philosophers up at night.
I bet.
These are the questions that have been debated for centuries, millennia even.
Yeah.
And we're still no closer to definitive answers.
Right.
But that's what makes it so fascinating because it's this ongoing quest for understanding. And even if we never fully grasp the answers, the journey itself is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, and it does make you think, it makes you kind of step outside of everyday life.
It forces you to zoom out.
Yes.
And look at the bigger picture.
The big picture, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Metaphysics, it grapples with questions that science alone can't answer.
Yeah.
Right? Like science is really good at telling us how things work.
It's great at explaining the mechanisms of the universe.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily tell us why.
Right.
It doesn't tell us what it all means.
Right.
And that's where philosophy comes in.
Right.
Metaphysics in particular.
So it explores concepts like time, space, causality, consciousness, and the ultimate nature of the universe.
It asks questions like, what is real?
Wow.
What is the relationship between mind and matter? Does God exist?
That's a big one.
It's a huge one.
Yeah.
And it's one that philosophy has been grappling with for, as long as there's been philosophy.
Right. And there's no one answer. Right?
No, there are many different perspectives. Wow. And it's up to each individual to decide what they find most compelling.
Yeah. And maybe it's not even about finding the answer, but it's about
it's about asking the question.
Asking the questions.
Yeah.
And kind of wrestling with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So,
okay, we're looking beyond the everyday world.
Yeah.
We're pondering these deepest mysteries of existence.
We're going deep.
We're going deep.
Into the heart of reality.
All right, so one of the central questions in metaphysics
is the nature of truth.
The truth.
What does it mean for something to be true?
Right, because we use that word all the time.
We do.
But what does it actually mean?
Yeah, what are we really saying when we say something is true?
Right, and is truth objective? Meaning it exists independently of our beliefs.
Right, so is there a truth out there?
Right.
Regardless of whether we believe it or not.
Right.
Or is truth subjective?
Meaning it depends on, my individual perspective.
Yeah, my truth.
My truth, your truth.
Right.
Go.
So is it all relative?
That's a big question.
It is.
It is a big question.
And it has huge implications.
It does.
For how we understand knowledge, morality, pretty much everything.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So there are many different theories of truth.
There are.
Okay. What are some of the big ones?
Okay. So one is the correspondence theory.
Correspondence. Okay.
This is a very intuitive theory of truth.
Okay.
It says that a statement is true if it corresponds to reality.
Okay. That makes sense.
So if I say the sky is blue, that statement is true if and only if the sky actually is blue.
Right. So it's matching up with what we observe in the world.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense.
So it's a very simple, straightforward theory.
Right.
But it also has its problems.
Okay. Like what?
Well, for example, what about statements about the past?
Okay.
Or the future? Or about things that we can't directly observe?
Right.
How do we know if those statements correspond to reality?
Right. So it's how far back can we go?
Yeah.
And how far forward can we project?
Right.
And what about things that are, very abstract or theoretical?
Right.
It gets a little trickier.
Yeah, okay.
But it's still a very important theory of truth.
Okay, so that's correspondence.
That's correspondence.
What else? What other theories are there?
Okay. Another one is the coherence theory.
Coherence, okay.
This one suggests that a belief is true if it fits into our overall web of beliefs without creating contradictions.
Okay.
So in other words, a belief is true
Yeah.
if it coheres with our other beliefs.
So it's all about like consistency?
It is about consistency.
Right.
It's about making sure that all of our beliefs fit together
Right.
into a kind of a unified whole.
Okay, so it's kind of like a puzzle.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
We need to find the pieces that fit together.
To create a complete picture.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And the coherence theory has its strengths.
Okay.
But it also has its weaknesses.
Like what?
Well, for example, what if our entire web of beliefs is based on a false premise?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
What if we're all just wrong about something fundamental?
Right. And then everything's kind of built on that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, so correspondence, coherence.
Coherence.
What other theories of truth?
Okay, another one is the pragmatist theory of truth.
Pragmatist.
This one's a little different.
Okay.
The pragmatist theory suggests that a belief is true if it's useful or helpful in practice.
Okay, so truth can be practical.
Exactly.
Not just about abstract ideas.
Pragmatism emphasizes the practical consequences of our beliefs.
So, like, does it work?
Yeah. Does it help us navigate the world?
Does it help us solve problems?
Does it help us achieve our goals?
Okay.
If so, then maybe it's true.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, of course, this raises all sorts of questions.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, what if something is useful but also harmful?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like lying can sometimes be useful,
Right.
but we wouldn't say that lying is therefore true.
Right.
So there are definitely some nuances here.
Right. Yeah.
And it's still a very interesting theory of truth.
Okay, so we've got correspondence, we've got coherence, we've got pragmatism.
Right.
Any other big theories of truth?
Okay, one more.
Okay.
The deflationary theory of truth.
Deflationary. Okay.
This one's a little bit more radical.
Okay.
The deflationary theory argues that truth isn't really a property at all.
What?
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as truth?
Well, that's kind of what they're saying.
Okay.
They're saying that saying it's true that snow is white is just a more complicated way of saying snow is white.
Okay.
They argue that the concept of truth doesn't add anything substantial to our understanding.
So it's just kind of like a linguistic part.
They're saying it's a bit redundant.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's a very minimalist theory of truth.
It is. Okay, so we've got all these different theories of truth.
We do.
Wow. It's amazing how a seemingly simple concept can be so complex.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's philosophy for you.
Right.
Always digging deeper.
Yeah.
Always trying to uncover the hidden complexities.
Yeah, so truth is still a mystery.
In a way, yes.
Even after all these centuries.
Even after all these brilliant minds have tried to grapple with it.
Yeah.
But that's part of what makes it so exciting. It's about exploring these fundamental questions, even if we don't always arrive at definitive answers.
Right. So the journey is as important as the destination.
Absolutely.
Okay. I like that.
So
we've pondered truth.
We have.
What about another big one?
Okay.
The problem of universals.
Wow.
What on earth is that?
The problem of universals.
It sounds very grand.
It is a very grand problem.
Okay.
So think about your cat.
My cat.
Yeah. It's a unique individual, right?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Very unique.
But it also shares certain characteristics with other cats.
Right. She's furry.
Furry, she meows.
She meows.
She chases laser pointers.
She does.
Presumably.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
These shared characteristics are called universal.
Universals, yeah.
Yeah. So furriness, meowing, laser pointer chasing.
Okay.
Those are universals.
Right, because all cats share those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The problem of universals is the question of whether these universals exist independently of the things that have them.
Wait, so are you saying my cat's furriness is somehow separate from my cat?
That's the kind of question that philosophers grapple with.
My mind is blown.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, where do these universals reside?
Right.
Do they exist out there in the world?
Okay.
Or are they just concepts in our minds?
Right.
So Plato, for example.
I can tell.
Yeah. He believed in a realm of forms.
A realm of forms.
Yeah, it sounds very mystical.
It does.
But that was Plato for you.
Okay.
Very mystical.
Yeah.
So he believed that these universals exist as perfect, eternal entities in the separate realm.
Okay, so like there's this realm of perfect forms.
Right.
And then everything in our world
is just a reflection.
Is just a reflection of that.
Those perfect forms.
Wow. So my cat is basically just like a shadow.
Yeah, a pale imitation.
A pale imitation.
You have the ultimate furry ideal.
The ultimate furry ideal.
That exists in the realm of forms.
Wow. Okay, that's wild.
It is wild.
Okay, so that's Plato.
That's Plato.
Now, not everybody agrees with Plato, right?
Of course not.
What other?
Philosophy is all about disagreement.
It is, yeah.
So Aristotle, for instance.
Okay, Aristotle.
Yeah.
Another big name.
Another big name.
Okay.
He was a student of Plato.
Oh, okay.
But they disagreed about a lot of things.
Right, because even students can disagree with their teachers.
Exactly.
Okay.
So Aristotle believed that universals exist within the objects themselves.
Okay.
So your cat's furriness is an inherent property of your cat.
Okay.
Not a separate entity.
So it's not like floating around.
It's not in some other realm.
It's part of the cat.
It's part of the cat.
Okay, so two very different perspectives.
Two very different perspectives.
On what it means to be furry.
On the nature of furriness.
Wow. Okay, so we've got Plato's forms.
Right.
We've got Aristotle's inherent properties.
Inherent properties.
What other approaches are there?
Well, they're also nominalists.
Nominalists?
Yeah.
Right.
They deny the existence of universals altogether.
What?
Yeah. They're like, universals? What universals?
Okay.
They argue that universals are just names we give to groups of things.
Right.
That share similar characteristics.
So it's just a label.
It's just a label.
Okay.
It's a convenient way to categorize things.
Okay, so for nominalists, cattiness
Yeah.
is just a convenient label we use
Exactly.
to categorize all the furry, meowing creatures in the world.
It would say there's no separate cattiness essence floating around out there. It's just a word.
It's just a word.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So we have Plato with his forms.
Right.
We have Aristotle with his inherent properties.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the nominalists who are like,
yeah,
what are you guys talking about?
It's like choosing your own philosophical adventure.
It is.
Right.
It is.
Okay, and these different views have major implications for how we understand reality, language, knowledge.
They shape our entire worldview.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it gets really interesting when we start applying these concepts to other areas.
Yeah.
Like ethics and political philosophy.
Exactly.
Ooh, speaking of which.
Let's move on.
Let's move on.
To our next big area.
All right, next up.
Epistemology.
Epistemology, I'm already feeling my brain getting a workout.
Yeah, it's a good workout.
It is. But this is all so fascinating.
It is. It's a very rich and rewarding field.
It is. Okay, so epistemology is all about knowledge.
It is.
Okay.
How do we know what we know?
Okay.
What are the sources of knowledge?
Right.
What are the limits of knowledge?
Okay.
And how can we justify our beliefs?
So it's like the philosophy of knowledge.
Exactly.
Like digging into the very foundations of
of
how we know what we know.
It's about questioning the very basis of our understanding of the world.
Wow, okay.
So one of the classic theories of knowledge is the justified true belief theory, or JTB theory for short.
JTB.
It states that for something to be considered knowledge, it must be a belief that is true, justified, and actually held by the person.
Okay, so it's not enough for it to just be true.
No.
Right.
You can't just stumble upon a true fact.
Right.
And claim it as knowledge.
Okay, so like if I find a $100 bill on the street.
Yeah.
It's true. There's a $100 bill on the street.
Yeah.
But I don't really know.
Right. You just happened to come across it.
I just stumbled upon it.
You didn't know it was there before.
Right. Right. And I have to have...
You have to have a good reason.
Good reasons for believing it.
Yeah, you need justification.
Justification is key.
Justification is key.
Okay, but what if somebody has a true belief that happens to be justified?
Yeah.
But only by chance?
Yes.
Like a lucky guess.
This is the classic problem of epistemic luck.
Epistemic luck.
Okay, where you get the right answer.
Yeah.
But not for the right reasons.
So can you have a true justified belief that isn't really knowledge?
That's the challenge posed by what's known as the Gettier problem.
The Gettier problem.
Named after Edmund Gettier, a philosopher who came up with these thought experiments.
Okay. Showing
situations where someone has a justified true belief, but we wouldn't intuitively consider it knowledge.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, so imagine you're looking at a clock.
Yeah.
That stopped at 2:00 p.m.
Okay.
You believe it's 2:00 p.m. And you're justified in that belief.
Because I'm looking at the clock.
Because you're looking at the clock.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to you, the clock stopped hours ago.
Right.
But it just happens to be 2:00 p.m. right now.
So my belief is true.
Your belief is true.
And justified.
And justified.
But it's based on faulty information.
Exactly.
It feels like luck rather than actual knowledge.
It's a case of epistemic luck.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You got the right answer.
But for the wrong reasons.
But not for the right reason.
Right. Okay, so that's the Gettier problem.
That's the Gettier problem.
It highlights that even with this justified, true belief theory,
right,
there are still these gray areas.
There are always gray areas in philosophy. Because we're dealing with complex concepts that don't always fit neatly into our categories.
Right. Okay, so what other challenges are there to this idea of knowing anything for certain?
Well, there's skepticism.
Skepticism, okay.
The view that true knowledge is impossible, or at least very difficult to attain.
So are skeptics like the ultimate party poopers of philosophy?
You could say that.
Okay.
They're the ones who are always questioning everything.
Okay.
Always doubting.
Right.
Always pushing us to provide more evidence. But you know what? They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge.
Okay.
And to be more critical of our beliefs.
So it's a good thing in a way.
It is a good thing.
Okay.
Because they want us to be sure that our beliefs are well-founded.
Okay.
And not just based on blind faith or assumption.
Okay, so skepticism, even though it sounds kind of negative, actually can be a positive thing.
It can be a very powerful tool
for making sure that what we believe is actually true.
Exactly.
Okay, so give me an example of like a famous skeptic.
Okay, well, skepticism has been around for centuries.
Right.
One of the earliest skeptics was Pyrrho of Elis.
Pyrrho of Elis.
Yeah, he was a Greek philosopher who lived in the 4th century BCE.
Okay.
And he argued that we can't know anything for certain. Wow.
Not even whether we exist.
Okay.
So he advocated for a kind of radical suspension of judgment.
So don't believe anything.
Well, not necessarily don't believe anything.
Okay.
But don't claim to know anything for certain, because you can't.
Okay.
Another famous skeptic was Sextus Empiricus.
Sextus Empiricus.
Yeah, he lived in the 2nd century CE.
Okay.
And he wrote these extensive works outlining all the different arguments for skepticism.
Wow. Okay.
So these guys were really challenging our assumptions about what we can know.
Okay, so they were like the OG skeptics.
The OG skeptic.
Okay, but surely not all philosophers are skeptics, right?
Of course not.
Okay.
But even those who believe that knowledge is possible often use skepticism as a tool.
Okay, how so?
So René Descartes, for example.
Descartes, okay.
The famous philosopher who said, "I think, therefore I am."
Right.
He employed a method of radical doubt.
Radical doubt.
To arrive at what he considered indubitable truths.
So he was basically like, I'm going to doubt everything, until I find something that I can't doubt.
Wow, so what did he end up with?
Well, he systematically doubted everything he could.
Okay.
His senses, his memories, even the existence of the external world.
Wow, so he was like living in the Matrix?
Kind of.
Okay.
But he eventually found something that he couldn't doubt.
Okay. What was that?
The fact that he was thinking.
Okay.
And therefore, he must exist.
Because if he's thinking, he must exist.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was his foundation of certain knowledge.
His starting point.
His starting point.
Okay, I can see how that would be a good starting point.
Right.
Because if you can't even be sure that you exist...
then you can't really build anything on top of that.
Right, you've got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere.
So that was Descartes.
That was Descartes.
And his radical doubt.
His radical doubt.
Okay, what about David Hume?
Hume.
Another big name in philosophy.
Another big name.
Was he a skeptic too?
Hume was an empiricist, meaning he believed that all knowledge ultimately comes from experience.
Okay.
So he wasn't a skeptic in the same way that Pyrrho of Elis was.
Okay.
But he did use skepticism to question traditional notions of causality, the self, and even induction.
Induction, what's that?
Induction is the idea that the future will resemble the past.
Okay.
So, for example, we believe that the sun will rise tomorrow because it's always risen in the past.
Right.
But Hume argued that we can't really prove that. We just have a strong expectation based on our experience.
So it's like we're assuming that the patterns that we've observed in the past
will continue in the future.
But there's no guarantee.
There's no guarantee.
Okay.
And Hume was very skeptical of that assumption.
Wow, so even something as basic as believing that the sun will rise tomorrow is something that a skeptic would question.
They would say we can't know that for certain. Now, of course, Hume wasn't saying that we should go around not believing that the sun will rise tomorrow. He was just saying that we should be aware
of the limits of our knowledge?
The limits of our knowledge.
Okay.
And that we shouldn't be too dogmatic.
Dogmatic meaning?
Meaning, clinging to our beliefs too rigidly.
Okay, so be open to the possibility that we could be wrong.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because we're fallible creatures.
We are, yeah.
And we make mistakes.
We do.
And that's okay.
Okay.
As long as we're willing to learn from them.
I like that. So even if we can't achieve absolute certainty, we can still use skepticism.
To refine our understanding, to avoid dogmatism.
Okay, so skepticism is a tool.
It's a tool.
To help us get closer to the truth.
Even if we never fully reach it.
Right. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like political philosophy is where ethics meets the real world, you know, where we actually try to figure out how to create a just and fair society.
Exactly. Yeah, political philosophy takes those abstract ethical principles and tries to apply them to the messy reality of human social life.
Right, because it's easy to talk about, like, what's right and wrong.
Yeah, in theory.
And theory in the abstract.
Right, when you're just sitting in your armchair thinking about.
Right, but then when you actually have to, like, make laws and create systems and...
Yeah, when you have to deal with real people, with real interests and conflicts, it gets a lot more complicated.
It does, and just as there are, like, different schools of thought in ethics, there are also various perspectives on how society should be organized and governed.
Absolutely. There's no one right answer to these questions because different people have different values, different priorities, different visions of what a good society looks like.
Okay, so one of the central questions in political philosophy is the problem of justice.
The problem of justice, yes, that's a big one.
A big one. What does a just society even look like?
Yeah, what does it mean to be fair?
How should we distribute resources fairly?
How do we balance individual rights with the common good?
What rights and freedoms should citizens have?
All these questions are intertwined.
They are?
And they're not easy to answer.
No. And these are questions that have been debated for like millennia.
For as long as humans have lived in groups, we've been wrestling with these questions.
And we're still wrestling with them.
Absolutely, and there are no easy answers.
Right. But it is fascinating to kind of see how different philosophers have approached these issues.
Yeah, they offer us different frameworks, different ways of thinking about these problems.
Okay, so to illustrate the range of perspectives, let's consider two prominent 20th century philosophers, John Rawls and Robert Nozick.
Robert Nozick, two very different thinkers.
Okay, what were their takes on justice?
Okay, so Rawls,
Yeah.
he's known for his theory of justice as fairness.
Justice as fairness, okay.
He argued that a just society is one that would be chosen by rational individuals behind a veil of ignorance.
A veil of ignorance? What is that?
Imagine a group of people coming together to design a society.
Right.
But they don't know anything about their own individual characteristics or what position they'll occupy in that society.
So it's like they're designing a society from scratch.
Yeah.
But they don't know where they're going to end up.
They don't know if they'll be rich or poor, healthy or sick, talented or untalented.
Right.
They don't know anything about themselves.
So they have to kind of create a system that's fair for everyone.
That's fair for everyone, regardless of who they turn out to be.
Wow, okay.
So Rawls believed that under these conditions, people would choose principles that ensure basic liberties for all.
Okay, so like freedom of speech, freedom of religion.
Exactly. All the basic rights and freedoms that we take for granted in a liberal democracy. And they would also prioritize the well-being of
the least advantaged.
So they would make sure that even the people at the bottom are taken care of.
Because if you don't know what position you'll occupy in society, you'd want to make sure that even the worst off members are treated fairly.
Right, because you might be one of them.
You might be one of them.
Yeah, okay.
It's like playing a game where you don't know what hand you'll be dealt.
Right.
So you want to make sure the rules are fair for everyone.
Okay, so that's Rawls.
That's Rawls.
What about Nozick?
Nozick took a very different approach.
Okay.
He was a libertarian philosopher.
Okay.
And he championed an entitlement theory of justice.
Entitlement theory, okay.
He argued that a just distribution of resources is one that arises from voluntary transactions and respects individual property rights.
So if I earn my money fairly, I'm entitled to keep it.
You're entitled to keep it.
Okay.
And the government has no right to take it from you.
Even if it's to help people who are less fortunate. Even if it's to help people who are less fortunate.
Okay, so he's really emphasizing individual freedom.
Yeah.
And limited government intervention.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's kind of like a free market approach.
It is a very free market approach.
Okay.
He believed that any attempt to redistribute wealth, even for seemingly noble goals.
Like helping the poor.
Yeah, like helping the poor, providing healthcare, education, all those things.
Okay.
He believed that violated individual rights and undermined a free society.
So he would say that, like, taxation is theft.
Essentially, yes.
Okay, wow, that's a pretty radical view.
It is a radical view, but it's one that's shared by many libertarians.
Okay, so we have Rawls advocating for a more egalitarian society.
Where the government plays a role.
Where the government's more involved.
Yeah, in reducing inequality.
And then we have Nozick.
Yeah.
Defending a system based on individual liberty.
And free markets.
And free markets. Where the government's role is very limited.
Very limited.
It's a classic debate.
It's a fundamental debate in political philosophy.
What do you think about these contrasting perspectives?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because both Rawls and Nozick raise important points.
Right.
Rawls forces us to think about what principles we would agree to if we didn't know our own position in society.
Right, if we were behind that veil of ignorance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Nozick highlights the importance of individual rights and the potential dangers of government overreach.
Okay.
So it's really a question of how you balance these different values.
Right.
How do you create a society that is both fair and free?
Right.
And that's the challenge of political philosophy.
It is. Okay, so we've talked about justice.
Yeah.
What about another foundational concept in political philosophy?
Democracy.
Democracy, many of us take it for granted.
Yeah, we live in democracies.
We do, yeah.
So it's easy to assume that that's just the natural way to organize society.
Right.
But democracy has a long and complex history.
It does, yeah.
And it's not always been seen as the ideal form of government.
How about
In
that?
fact, for much of human history, democracy was viewed with suspicion.
Really?
Yeah, the ancient Greeks, who are often credited with inventing democracy, they were actually quite ambivalent about it.
Okay.
They recognized the potential benefits of democracy, but they also saw the potential dangers.
Like what?
Well, they worried about the tyranny of the majority.
The tyranny of the majority. Okay.
Where the interests of the many could trample the rights of the few.
Right, so even if most people vote for something.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do.
Right, okay.
Especially if it infringes on the rights of others.
So were they saying that democracy is bad?
Not necessarily. They were just saying that it needs to be carefully balanced with other values.
Okay.
Like individual liberty, the rule of law.
So they were advocating for like a more nuanced approach.
Exactly. They didn't think that democracy was a simple solution.
Right.
They thought it was a complex system that required a lot of thought and care.
Okay. And who were some of the thinkers who had these concerns?
Well, both Plato and Aristotle, who we talked about earlier.
The big names, yeah.
The big names, yeah.
Okay.
They had reservations about democracy.
Okay.
Plato believed that the ideal rulers would be philosopher kings.
Philosopher kings.
Yeah, people who possess wisdom, virtue, and a deep understanding of justice.
So not just anybody can be a ruler.
Not just anybody, according to Plato.
Okay.
He thought it required special training.
Right.
Special knowledge.
Like an enlightened ruler.
An enlightened ruler, yeah. Aristotle.
Yeah.
He favored a mixed constitution.
A mixed constitution? What does that mean?
Combining elements of democracy, aristocracy, and monarchy.
So like a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything.
Okay.
The idea was to prevent any one group from gaining too much power.
So kind of like a system of checks and balances.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's a reminder that even the most cherished ideals, like democracy, require critical examination and constant refinement.
We can't just take them for granted. We have to keep thinking about them, keep questioning them, trying to improve them.
I like that. And beyond Plato and Aristotle,
Yeah.
didn't some philosophers go even further?
They did.
And just reject the whole idea of state power?
Yes, you're thinking of anarchists.
Anarchists, okay.
They argue that any form of government, even a democratically elected one,
ultimately infringes on individual autonomy.
Exactly.
And creates hierarchies that lead to oppression.
They believe that power corrupts.
Okay.
And that the only way to create a truly just and free society is to abolish the state altogether.
Wow.
And so they envision a society without rulers, without hierarchies, where individuals freely cooperate and manage their affairs through voluntary associations.
So it's like a very decentralized.
Grassroots
kind of system.
Exactly.
Wow, okay.
So that's anarchism.
Anarchism, it really challenges.
It does.
Our conventional notions.
It's a very radical idea.
It is.
But it's one that's been around for a long time.
Right.
And it's one that continues to be debated and discussed.
Okay, so it seems like every corner of philosophy that we've explored, from logic and metaphysics
to ethics and political thought,
pushes us to question our assumptions.
Absolutely.
And consider alternative ways of thinking.
That's the beauty of philosophy, isn't it?
It is.
It's an ongoing conversation, a quest for understanding that has no definitive answers.
Okay.
But it opens up endless possibilities for inquiry and growth.
It's about asking the big questions.
Yeah.
Challenging our assumptions. And constantly striving for wisdom.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But my brain is definitely feeling stretched.
Mine too.
And stimulated.
It's a good feeling.
It is a good feeling after this deep dive into philosophy.
It's been a journey. It's a philosophical odyssey.
Yes. We've covered so much ground: logic, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and political philosophy.
Oh, in just a few hours.
It's amazing how these different areas of thought connect and inform each other.
Yeah, it's all interconnected.
It is. It's like this big web of ideas.
Yeah, you can't really understand one area of philosophy without understanding the others.
Totally. And even though we've only scratched the surface...
Yeah, we've barely begun to explore the depths of these topics.
I know, but I feel like I've gained a new appreciation for the depth and the relevance.
It's not just some abstract academic pursuit.
It's not.
It's about understanding ourselves, the world around us, how we can live more meaningful and fulfilling lives.
And that's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
It is.
To use these tools of philosophy to engage with the world in a more thoughtful,
more critical
and compassionate way.
Exactly.
I couldn't agree more. So to all our listeners out there, keep thinking. Keep questioning. Keep exploring this fascinating world of philosophy.
Yeah, there's always more to learn.
There's always more to discover.
And more to ponder.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into philosophy. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.
Absolutely. Keep those brains working.